5 torpedo bombers vanish into a clear afternoon sky. It is December 5, 1945, and Flight 19 is on a routine training mission from Fort Lauderdale. The pilots are experienced, the weather is fair, yet after a series of confused radio messages about compasses spinning and the ocean looking wrong, they are gone forever, swallowed by a stretch of water we now call the Bermuda Triangle. This modern mystery is only the beginning. By the end of this journey, you will uncover a hidden history that suggests this patch of ocean has been a place of vanishing for thousands of years. We are not just looking for lost planes or ships. We are searching for answers in the sunken ruins of Atlantis, in the warnings of Christopher Columbus, and in the Earth's own ancient, volatile power. What forgotten truth lies beneath these waves, waiting to pull the unwary into legend? Flight 19's disappearance was the spark that lit the modern legend. In the 1960s, a writer named Vincent Gaddis gave this mystery its famous shape, drawing 3 lines on a map from Miami to Bermuda to Puerto Rico and back. He called it the Bermuda Triangle, and a pop culture phenomenon was born. Books, documentaries, and sensational headlines fed the idea of a supernatural zone where ships and planes vanished without a trace. But this carefully defined triangle is a modern invention, a brand name for a fear that is far, far older. To find the real story, we must look past the 20th century hype and sail into much deeper waters. Centuries before that map was drawn, sailors were already whispering about this part of the Atlantic. Christopher Columbus himself, on his first voyage to the New World in 1492, recorded bizarre events in his ship's log. He wrote of a strange light dancing on the horizon, and of his compass needle swinging wildly away from true north, as if the very laws of navigation were breaking down. His crew was terrified, convinced they were sailing off the edge of the world. These are not the stories of a modern mystery writer. They are the first-hand accounts of one of history's greatest explorers encountering something he could not explain. This suggests a profound possibility. What if the power of the Bermuda Triangle is not a new anomaly, but an ancient one? What if the cultures that lived and sailed these seas thousands of years ago witnessed its effects and wove those experiences into their myths and legends? Their stories of lost civilizations, sunken cities, and vengeful sea gods might not be pure fantasy. They could be fragmented memories, a warning passed down through generations about a place where the sea itself does not behave as it should. To understand the triangle, we may need to listen to these ancient voices and to search for clues not on our charts but in their ruins. Columbus was not the first to feel that unease on the open ocean. His terrified crew, watching their compasses spin uselessly, were echoing a fear that is thousands of years old. To find the earliest warnings, we must sail back even further, to the masters of the ancient Mediterranean, the Phoenicians and their successors, the Carthaginians. These were the greatest explorers and traders of their age, venturing far beyond the safe waters of their home sea. Their legends speak of a terrifying boundary marked by the Pillars of Hercules, what we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. Beyond those pillars, they said, lay the ocean of darkness, an endless and treacherous sea. But some stories were more specific. There were tales among them of a region where ships would simply not return, a graveyard of vessels swallowed by strange fogs and unpredictable currents. They called it the Sea of Lost Ships. This was not a place on any of their trade maps. It was a warning, a story told to keep young sailors from venturing too far into the unknown Atlantic. Think about that for a moment. These were not superstitious fishermen. They were the naval superpower of the ancient world. For them to develop and pass down such a specific dread about a particular area means something tangible likely happened there. Ships under their command, experienced crews with knowledge of the stars and winds, probably vanished without explanation in that stretch of water. Those losses became legend, a cultural memory of a place that did not play by the rules of the sea they knew. So when Columbus recorded his compass spinning and saw strange lights centuries later, he was not discovering a new mystery. He was sailing directly into an old one, an ancient maritime cautionary tale that had been waiting in the deep long before his ships were ever built. This connection between ancient legend and early modern observation is our first major clue. It tells us the phenomenon is not a 20th century fluke, but a persistent feature of this part of the world. The fear has a history, and if ancient sailors witnessed something powerful enough to shape their myths, what physical force could possibly be responsible for effects that span millennia? To answer that, we must leave the surface of the sea and look deep below it to the very ground beneath the waves. The ancient fear of a sea that swallows ships points us toward a physical cause, but one legend offers a far more spectacular explanation. It is the story of a lost world, a civilization of such power that its final cataclysm might still ripple through the ocean today. We are talking, of course, about Atlantis. The source of this story is not some dusty folklore, but the work of one of history's greatest philosophers, Plato. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BC, Plato describes a vast and mighty island empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean. This was not a primitive society. Atlantis, according to Plato, was an engineering marvel with concentric rings of water and land, grand harbors, and temples plated in precious metals. Its people had conquered lands as far as Africa and Europe until they were finally defeated by the ancestors of the Athenians, but the empire's end did not come in battle. Plato writes that it was consumed by the sea, quote, in a single day and night of misfortune. The entire island, with all its warriors and glory, sank beneath the waves and vanished. Now consider the geography. Plato places Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean beyond Gibraltar. Modern seekers of the lost continent have proposed countless locations, but one of the most persistent theories places its ruins right under the Bermuda Triangle. The idea is compellingly simple. What if the triangle's strange phenomena are the dying echoes of that ancient catastrophe? Proponents of this theory suggest that the advanced Atlanteans possessed a powerful energy source, often described as great crystals, which powered their cities. When Atlantis sank, these crystal energy generators were not destroyed. They remain active on the ocean floor, buried under silt and rock, periodically firing off massive bursts of electromagnetic energy. This, they argue, would explain everything Columbus witnessed and everything modern pilots fear. A sudden surge of electromagnetic power could scramble compasses, disable aircraft instrumentation, and even create those eerie glowing lights in the sky and water. The very ground of the lost continent, seething with unstable ancient technology, becomes the engine of the triangle's mystery. It is a beautiful and complete story, weaving ancient philosophy, lost technology, and modern mystery into a single, thrilling narrative. The Bermuda Triangle is not just a random patch of dangerous ocean in this view. It is a grave marker, and the ghosts of Atlantis are still stirring in their deep technological tomb. The crystal theory transforms Atlantis from a sunken city into a still beating heart of mystery. Esoteric traditions describe these not as mere decorative gems, but as colossal, engineered power generators harnessing the Earth's own energies. In this vision, the Atlanteans mastered a form of crystal technology so advanced it lit their cities, powered their vessels, and perhaps even stabilized their very continent. Their civilization did not just fall, it overloaded. A cataclysmic event, perhaps a geological shift or their own technological hubris, caused a catastrophic feedback loop. The great crystals, overcharged, shattered the land and sank it beneath the waves. But what if they did not simply turn off? Imagine these fractured power sources, buried under miles of ocean sediment, still connected to deep geological forces. They could lie dormant for centuries, then suddenly flare to life, releasing a burst of raw electromagnetic energy straight up through the water column and into the atmosphere above. To a ship or plane passing overhead, this would be an invisible catastrophe. Compasses would spin wildly as the local magnetic field is violently distorted. Electrical systems would short out and fail. Even the very air might ionize, creating those strange, luminous glows reported by so many witnesses. Some theories go further, suggesting such intense energy concentrations could temporarily warp the fabric of space-time itself, creating brief dimensional rifts. A vessel might not sink, but simply slip sideways out of our reality, vanishing without a trace or a distress call. This idea moves the mystery from mechanical failure into the realm of theoretical physics, offering an explanation for the most baffling disappearances where no wreckage is ever found. The search for physical evidence leads us to the shallow banks near the island of Bimini in the Bahamas. Here, in the late 1960s, pilots and divers reported seeing what appeared to be a massive, man-made road of enormous rectangular stone blocks lying on the seafloor. Dubbed the Bimini Road, this formation ignited immediate speculation. Could these be the tumbled remains of a seawall, a pier, or a foundation from Atlantis? Mainstream geologists argue convincingly that these are a perfectly natural formation of beach rock, fractured by time into neat blocks, but for those who believe, the timing and location feel like more than coincidence. The discovery of a seemingly architectural structure right in the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, just as the modern legend was taking hold, felt like a signpost from the deep. Sonar surveys have since hinted at other, larger anomalies in the region, including what some interpret as pyramid-like shapes rising from the abyssal plain. While these are likely natural geological formations, their suggestive silhouettes fuel the powerful human desire to connect the dots. They become the imagined spires of a drowned metropolis, the physical anchor for the crystal energy theory. The narrative is irresistibly complete. The ruins are there, the power source is there, and the mysterious effects in the sky and sea are the direct result. It is a story that explains everything, but that is also its greatest weakness. A theory that can explain anything often proves nothing at all. The leap from a philosophical allegory written by Plato to active crystal reactors on the ocean floor is a monumental one, built more on yearning than on empirical evidence. So we are left with a choice. Do we follow the siren song of a lost super-civilization, or do we look for answers in the cold, hard, and equally strange sciences of the Earth itself? The allure of a sunken city is powerful, but the cold light of science offers a different view of the Bimini Road. Stretching for over half a mile off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas, this formation is a straight line of massive, rectangular limestone blocks resting on the sandy seafloor in about 20 feet of water. To the untrained eye, it looks unmistakably like a ruined causeway or a harbor wall, a paved road leading straight into the blue oblivion. Discovered in 1968, its timing felt prophetic, a physical clue emerging just as the Bermuda Triangle legend was capturing the world's imagination. Here, it seemed, was the first tangible piece of Atlantis, lying right in the heart of the mystery zone. The blocks are impressively uniform, many appearing to be perfect rectangles weighing several tons each, fitted together in a long, linear pattern that feels too orderly to be random. Proponents of the ancient harbor theory argue that the stones show clear tool marks and are composed of a rock not native to that immediate area, suggesting they were quarried elsewhere and transported. They point to similar, known harbor constructions from the ancient Mediterranean, built with massive blocks to withstand the sea's force. Could this be a docking site for Atlantean ships, or perhaps a ceremonial avenue leading to a temple now buried under sand? The location is the most compelling part of the argument for many. It is not just near the Bermuda Triangle, it is directly inside its imagined boundaries. If a pre-flood civilization, whether you call it Atlantis or something else, existed in this region, its coastal infrastructure would now be underwater. The Bimini Road in this narrative is not a coincidence. It is a surviving fragment, a corner of a drowned map poking through the sand, marking the epicenter of the ancient cataclysm that created the triangle's enduring curse. The emotional weight of this idea is immense. It transforms the ocean from an empty grave into an archaeological site, suggesting we are not dealing with ghosts or energy fields, but with the physical ruins of a forgotten world whose collapse still haunts these waters. However, mainstream geology presents a far less mystical, but no less fascinating explanation. Geologists who have studied the site extensively identify the blocks as a perfectly natural formation of beach-rock. Beach-rock is a type of sandstone that forms quickly in tropical tidal zones when sand and shell fragments cement together with calcium carbonate, essentially acting as nature's concrete. As sea levels have risen since the end of the last ice age, what was once a shoreline is now submerged. The neat rectangular blocks, they argue, are the result of a natural process called jointing. As the cemented beach-rock layer forms, it dries and contracts, creating stress fractures. Over millennia, these fractures expand, often in remarkably straight lines and right angles, breaking the rock into those seemingly man-made blocks. The composition is local, and the pattern, while striking, is a common geological occurrence found in many coastal areas around the world. There is no need for ancient engineers, only for time, tide, and the basic chemistry of a shallow, sun-drenched sea. So we are left with a stark divide. One side sees a coded message from the past, a literal stepping stone to a greater mystery. The other sees a beautiful geological accident, a trick of perception where our pattern-seeking brains see design in natural chaos. The Bimini Road stands as the perfect symbol for the entire Bermuda Triangle debate. It is a Rorschach test on the ocean floor. What you see in those stones depends entirely on what you believe about the deep and about our own forgotten history. That divide between myth and geology is exactly where the ocean itself offers a more tangible and perhaps more terrifying explanation. Lying within the loose boundaries of the Bermuda Triangle is one of the most peculiar places on our planet, a sea without shores. This is the Sargasso Sea, a 2 million square mile oval of deep blue water defined not by land, but by a slow, clockwise swirl of mighty ocean currents. The Gulf Stream forms its western wall, while other currents complete the aquatic fence. Trapped inside this vast, gentle whirlpool are the legendary waters that have fueled sailors' dread for 1,000 years. Its most famous feature is the thick, floating mats of golden-brown sargassum weed, a free-floating seaweed that forms rafts that can stretch for miles. To ancient mariners peering over the gunwales of their wooden ships, this was not a natural phenomenon. It was a living trap. They saw a still, eerie ocean choked with vegetation, a place where the winds often died completely, leaving sailing ships stranded for weeks in a silent, oppressive calm. They called it the horse latitudes, a name some say comes from the terrible practice of throwing horses overboard to conserve drinking water during these endless, windless delays. The Sargasso became a legendary graveyard for vessels, their bleached timbers slowly swallowed by the clinging weed. Is it any wonder that stories grew of a sea that captures ships, holding them forever in a silent, green embrace? This was not a supernatural force, but a brutal geographical one. A wooden sailing ship trapped in the doldrums of the Sargasso, its crew dying of thirst and starvation, is a ghost ship in the making long before it ever sinks. The psychological toll alone was enough to seed myths, but the danger goes deeper than calm winds and seaweed. The Sargasso Sea sits atop a profound underwater geography, over a region where the seafloor plunges suddenly from the continental shelf into the deep abyssal plain. This dramatic change can create unpredictable local currents and strange water conditions. More critically, this area is known for what oceanographers call deep ocean waves or internal waves. These are massive, slow-moving waves that occur beneath the surface between layers of water of different densities. They are invisible from above, but they can be hundreds of feet tall. A ship, especially an older, less stable sailing vessel, caught on the surface above one of these rolling underwater mountains could experience sudden, violent turbulence out of a perfectly calm sea, or find itself pushed drastically off course without any visible cause. For a captain relying on the stars and a compass, this would feel like the ocean itself was betraying the laws of nature. Combine this with the well-documented magnetic anomalies in the region, slight but measurable shifts in the Earth's magnetic field that can throw a compass off by a few critical degrees, and you have a perfect recipe for disorientation. An ancient Phoenician galley or a Spanish galleon, becalmed in the weed, then shoved by an invisible deep wave, its compass subtly wrong, would sail in circles until supplies ran out. Their fate from a distant perspective would be a sudden and complete vanishing. The Sargasso Sea, therefore, is not just a setting for the triangle's mystery. It is a likely engine for it. It provides a sobering, natural explanation for the ancient legends of a sea that traps ships, proving that sometimes the truth behind a myth is not a lost crystal city, but the simple, immense, and indifferent power of the sea itself. The Sargasso Sea shows us a slow, atmospheric danger, but the seabed beneath the triangle holds a threat that is sudden and explosive. The leading scientific theory points to a geological time bomb, one that has been quietly arming itself for millions of years. The culprit is methane hydrate, a strange, ice-like substance that forms under the immense pressure and cold of the deep ocean floor. Picture a crystalline cage of water molecules trapping vast amounts of natural methane gas inside. These deposits are not rare. They exist in staggering quantities along continental shelves worldwide, including the very foundations of the Bermuda Triangle. They are stable until something changes, a small earthquake, a landslide on the underwater slope, or even a gradual warming of ocean currents can crack that icy cage open. When it destabilizes, it does so catastrophically. The solid hydrate dissolves and the trapped methane gas expands explosively, transforming from a solid into a gargantuan bubble rushing toward the surface. Now imagine the ocean from a ship's perspective. The water directly beneath your hull is suddenly not water anymore. It is a frothing, churning column of gas. This eruption does something critical. It radically reduces the density of the sea. A ship, no matter its size, relies on the water's density to provide buoyancy. In the heart of a methane plume, that buoyancy vanishes. The vessel no longer floats. It simply drops, plunging straight down through the froth and into the abyss before it can even send a distress call. There would be no time for panic, no gradual listing. One moment you are sailing on calm seas, the next you are sinking like a stone in a glass of soda. The physics are chillingly straightforward and have even been demonstrated in laboratory experiments. For a wooden sailing ship of any era, the result is absolute and instantaneous oblivion. This is not a modern phenomenon. These methane hydrate deposits have been forming and destabilizing for eons, long before humans ever built a raft. Ancient sailors crossing these waters, whether Phoenician traders or pre-Columbian explorers, could have easily witnessed such an event. They would see a sister ship sailing nearby in perfect weather, suddenly vanish without a sound or a splash, swallowed whole by the ocean in the blink of an eye. How would they explain that? They had no concept of geology or gas hydrates. The only explanation that made sense to them was the wrath of a sea god, the hunger of a monster, or the curse of a haunted stretch of water. A single, witnessed eruption could seed legends that would last for centuries, stories of a vengeful patch of ocean that devours the unwary. This geological theory provides a powerful bridge between ancient myth and modern mystery. It offers a tangible, repeatable, and scientifically sound mechanism for the triangle's most dramatic signature, the sudden, complete disappearances. It tells us that the power behind the legend is not alien, nor is it Atlantean. It is the Earth itself, breathing out a deadly bubble from the deep past, a reminder that the most ancient explanations are sometimes written not in stone, but in gas and ice far below the waves. That same explosive breath from the deep holds the key to the sky above. If a methane plume is powerful enough to sink a ship by changing the density of water, its effects do not stop at the surface. The eruption continues, a colossal bubble of gas bursting into the open air and spreading rapidly into the atmosphere. For an aircraft flying overhead, this creates an invisible and deadly trap. Planes stay aloft because the air beneath their wings provides lift, a force generated by the density and pressure of the atmosphere. A massive, rising column of methane suddenly displaces that air, creating a temporary pocket where the atmosphere is far less dense. Imagine flying over what seems like clear sky, only to have the very air you rely on simply vanish from under you. The plane would experience a sudden, catastrophic loss of lift. It would not glide. It would drop like a stone, falling hundreds or even thousands of feet in seconds, far too fast for pilots to react or radio for help. To the crew, it would feel as if the sky itself had opened up and swallowed them. This explains the eeriest aspect of many aviation disappearances in the Triangle, like Flight 19, where pilots reported their instruments going haywire before all contact was lost. A violent, unplanned descent through a turbulent gas plume would cause compasses to spin and altimeters to give false readings, creating that exact sense of profound disorientation. But the danger does not end with a loss of lift. Methane is not just a buoyancy killer, it is a highly flammable fuel. In its concentrated form, mixing with oxygen in the air, it becomes explosive. Now consider the environment of a mid-century aircraft like those lost in the Triangle's most famous cases. Their engines were powered by combustion, with sparks and intense heat as a constant byproduct. A plane entering a dense, invisible cloud of methane gas would be flying directly into a floating bomb. The spark from a single engine backfire, or even the plane's static electricity, could be the match that lights the fuse. The result would be a sudden, massive fireball in the sky, an explosion that would vaporize the aircraft and leave little to no traceable debris. This terrifying possibility aligns with some of the few witnesses to Triangle incidents who have reported seeing strange flashes of light or fire on the horizon before a plane vanished. The geological time bomb on the ocean floor, therefore, offers a chillingly unified theory. A single ancient process, the episodic release of methane hydrates, can explain the full spectrum of the legend. It accounts for ancient ships swallowed without a trace, for wooden vessels found drifting crewless in the Sargasso Sea, and for modern aircraft plummeting from clear skies or exploding without warning. One force, as old as the seafloor itself, becomes the hidden architect behind both maritime and aerial mysteries, weaving a thread of tangible cause and effect through thousands of years of fear and speculation. The Earth, it seems, needs no crystals or lost cities to build a zone of mystery. It has its own volatile chemistry, and in the Bermuda Triangle, that chemistry occasionally reaches up to remind us of its power. The methane theory paints a picture of sudden, violent chaos, but the Triangle's most consistent trick is a silent, invisible one. It plays with direction itself. For centuries, navigators have reported their compasses behaving strangely in these waters, spinning uselessly or pointing steadily in the wrong direction. This is not sailors' superstition, it is a documented geographical fact, and it stems from a fundamental truth about our planet. True north and magnetic north are not the same place. True north is the fixed point at the top of the world's axis, the geographic North Pole. Magnetic north, however, is the shifting point towards which all compass needles point, governed by the churning iron in the Earth's core. These 2 points are usually hundreds of miles apart, creating a difference navigators must account for called magnetic variation. But here is the critical detail for our mystery. There is a line on the Earth where these 2 norths perfectly align, where the compass points to true geographic north. This line is called the agonic line. For much of recorded history, this agonic line ran directly through the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. Imagine you are a captain sailing from Europe to the Caribbean in the 1700s. Your entire voyage, you have been carefully correcting your compass readings to account for the difference between magnetic and true north. Then, as you enter the triangle's waters, that difference suddenly drops to zero. Your compass, which has been lying to you in a predictable way for weeks, now starts telling the absolute truth. If you did not know you had crossed the agonic line, this would seem like a catastrophic instrument failure. Your carefully plotted course would now be subtly, fatally wrong. An error of just 1 degree over a long ocean crossing can put you dozens of miles off course, leading you into treacherous shallows or the endless open Atlantic. This simple, natural alignment could explain countless historical losses where experienced sailors simply sailed into oblivion, trusting a compass that had, without warning, changed its rules. But the plot thickens further. Beyond this global alignment, the triangle may also host intense, localized magnetic anomalies. The ocean floor here is geologically complex, rich in volcanic rock and mineral deposits. Among these could be concentrated beds of lodestone, a naturally magnetic form of iron ore. If large enough, these submerged magnetic mountains could create powerful, distorted fields that pull a compass needle away from even the correct magnetic north, creating a temporary, ship-sized zone of navigational chaos. An ancient mariner's lodestone compass, or even a simple iron needle floating on water, would swing wildly when passing over such a spot. They had no science to explain this. To them, it would be a clear sign that they had entered a place where the normal laws of the world were broken, a sea ruled by capricious spirits. This raises a fascinating possibility. Could ancient civilizations, perhaps even the legendary Atlanteans, have known about these magnetic hotspots? If they possessed knowledge of lodestone's properties, they might have sought out these powerful deposits, using them for unknown technological or spiritual purposes. The very forces that disorient modern sailors could have been a source of power or navigation for a lost civilization, turning a natural hazard into a cultivated mystery. The compass, our most basic tool for finding our way, becomes the central character in this chapter of the story. Its erratic behavior links the confused radio calls of Flight 19 to the frightened log entries of Christopher Columbus, and perhaps even to the ancient legends of a sea that steals direction. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest danger is not a monster or an explosion, but a single, silent degree of error on a dark and endless sea. Our compass points east across the world to a mirror of the mystery. In the Pacific Ocean off the eastern coast of Japan, sailors whisper of another cursed sea. They call it the Ma-no-Yumi, the Devil's Sea, or more poetically, the Dragon's Triangle. Its reputation is a perfect echo of its Atlantic cousin. For centuries, Japanese fishermen have told stories of vessels vanishing without warning, of sudden, inexplicable storms that rise from calm waters, and of ghost ships found drifting with no crew aboard. The parallels are uncanny. Like the Bermuda Triangle, this Pacific zone has a modern catalogue of tragedies. In the 1950s, multiple Japanese research vessels sent to study the area disappeared completely, prompting the government to officially label the Devil's Sea as dangerous. Ancient folklore here does not speak of a lost continent, but of something equally potent. Japanese myths describe Ryugu-jo, magnificent palaces of dragon gods that lie on the ocean floor. These were not places for humans to visit. They were realms of powerful, capricious spirits who could summon storms or drag the curious down to a watery grave. The tales speak of underwater lights, strange whirlpools, and a palpable sense of dread that hangs over certain stretches of water. This is not a coincidence. Two separate cultures on opposite sides of the planet developed nearly identical legends about specific oceanic zones. Both stories feature unexplained vanishings, erratic compasses, and a deep-seated belief that something intelligent and volatile lives beneath the waves. The comparison forces a profound question. Are we looking at two isolated mysteries or two symptoms of a single global pattern? The answer may lie in the map of the world itself. Researchers like Ivan Sanderson, a biologist and writer, proposed that these zones are not random. He identified what he called vile vortices, 12 points roughly equidistant around the globe, located at specific latitudes. Both the Bermuda and Dragon's Triangles sit on 2 of these points. Other vortices include the mysterious Mohenjo-Daro region in Pakistan, the Easter Island area in the Pacific, and the Algerian megaliths in North Africa. These are all places rich with ancient ruins, unexplained phenomena, and historical disappearances. The theory suggests these points are nodes on a planetary energy grid, places where the Earth's magnetic or gravitational forces are naturally weaker or more chaotic. This idea of a living, energetic Earth was a cornerstone of many ancient traditions. Did our ancestors, through long observation or lost knowledge, recognize these unstable points? Did they mark them with monuments or weave them into cautionary myths, creating a global map of danger encoded not in parchment but in story? The dragon palaces of Japan and the sunken city of Atlantis may be different cultural interpretations of the same terrifying experience, a warning shouted across millennia that some gates on this planet are best left unopened. The mirror between oceans suggests a pattern written into the planet itself, but some sought to read that pattern not with maps but with visions. In the early 20th century, as the modern world was just beginning to buzz with electricity and radio waves, a man in a small Virginia town was offering answers from a place far older. His name was Edgar Cayce, and they called him the Sleeping Prophet. Cayce had no formal education in archaeology or geology. He was a devout Christian and a professional photographer who discovered, almost by accident, an astonishing ability. He could enter a self-induced trance, lying on a couch with his hands over his forehead, and in that state he would speak. He gave over 14,000 readings in his lifetime, diagnosing illnesses with uncanny accuracy and, most controversially, describing past lives and lost history. A significant portion of these trance discourses were devoted to a detailed, sprawling history of Atlantis. According to Cayce, Atlantis was not a myth, but a very real, cyclical civilization that rose and fell over hundreds of thousands of years. He placed its final catastrophic destruction around 10,000 BC, and he was startlingly specific about the location. The last remnants of the lost continent, he said, lay submerged near the island of Bimini in the Bahamas and in the region of the Sargasso Sea, right in the heart of our modern mystery zone. But Cayce did not just give coordinates. He described the society and its technology in terms that would later resonate deeply with seekers of the unexplained. The Atlanteans, in his visions, were masters of a powerful and ultimately destructive energy source. They used what he called firestones, also described as great crystals, to harness the forces of the earth and the stars. These crystals provided power for their cities, propelled their vehicles, and were central to their spiritual life. Cayce claimed the misuse of this crystal technology, a turning from spiritual law to selfish ambition, was what ultimately fractured the continent and sent it beneath the waves. The echoes of this idea are unmistakable. It directly fuels the modern crystal reactor theory for the Bermuda Triangle's phenomena. Cayce's readings suggested these firestones were not destroyed. They remained active, buried under the ocean floor, and he made a bold prophecy. He stated that evidence of Atlantis, specifically a portion of a temple, would re-emerge near Bimini in 1968 or 69. The discovery of the Bimini Road in exactly that time frame sent shockwaves through his followers, who saw it as a stunning validation. For them, Cayce was not a mere psychic. He was a remote viewer who had tapped into the Akashic Records, a cosmic library of all human history and knowledge. His work provides a spiritual and technological framework that many find missing from pure geological explanations. It transforms the triangle from a random hazard into a sacred, charged site, the grave of a fallen race whose forgotten machines still occasionally stir. Modern expeditions inspired by Cayce's readings continue to search the Bahamian banks with sonar and magnetometers. not just for ruins, but for anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field that could indicate a massive, buried crystalline structure. They are looking for the physical firestones, believing that if such an artifact were ever recovered, it would not only prove case right, but could revolutionize our understanding of energy and ancient history. The controversy around Edgar Cayce is immense. Skeptics rightly point out that his readings were often vague, internally inconsistent, and sometimes demonstrably wrong. They argue that the Bimini Road coincidence is just that, a coincidence, and that his descriptions of Atlantis borrow heavily from popular theosophical writings of his time. Yet, the enduring power of his narrative cannot be denied. He gave the legend a soul and a moral dimension, connecting the triangle's danger to a story of spiritual failure and technological hubris. Whether you see him as a profound mystic or a gifted storyteller, Edgar Cayce cemented the idea that the Bermuda Triangle is not just a place where things disappear. It is a place where a forgotten world might still be dreaming, its powerful heart slowly beating beneath the sand, waiting to be found or perhaps waiting to awaken once more. Edgar Cayce's visions of ancient crystals point toward a hidden energy, but what if that same force was accidentally rediscovered in the middle of a world war? The year is 1943, and the United States Navy is conducting a top-secret experiment in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The goal, according to the legend, was to make a warship invisible to radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. The vessel was the USS Eldridge, a Cannon-class destroyer escort. Witnesses claim that as the massive generators hummed to life, something went terribly wrong. A greenish fog enveloped the ship, and it did not just become invisible to radar. It vanished completely from sight, only to reappear moments later many miles away in the Norfolk Naval Yard before blinking back to Philadelphia. Sailors aboard were said to have suffered horrific consequences, some found fused with the metal of the ship itself, others driven insane, and a few reportedly phasing in and out of visibility for days afterward. The official Navy records flatly deny the event ever occurred, dismissing it as a hoax blended with mundane experiments in degaussing, a process that makes a ship less detectable to magnetic minds. Yet the story persists with astonishing detail, fueled by alleged eyewitness accounts and a persistent belief that the military uncovered something it could not control. This bizarre 20th century tale forms a startling bridge back to our ancient mystery. Think about the proposed mechanism: enormous electromagnetic coils pulsing with energy, warping light and matter around a vessel. Now recall the Atlantean firestones, those great crystals said to manipulate natural forces. The parallel is provocative. Could the Philadelphia experiment have been a crude, modern attempt to harness a type of energy field technology that a much older civilization had mastered? The theorists who connect these dots suggest that the scientists in Philadelphia, whether they knew it or not, were tapping into the same fundamental force that the Atlanteans used, a latent energy woven into the fabric of spacetime itself. Their experiment did not create a new phenomenon, it accidentally plugged into an ancient and volatile power grid. This idea leads us to the most mind-bending possibility of all. If such energy can make an object invisible or move it instantly across space, what else could it do? Some researchers propose that the Bermuda Triangle is a natural version of those Philadelphia generators. In this view, the triangle is not just a place of electromagnetic anomalies, but a temporary and unstable portal, a time vortex. The concept comes from the edges of modern physics. Intense electromagnetic storms, like those possibly generated by methane eruptions or geological stresses, could theoretically create localized distortions in spacetime. Under extreme conditions, the very coordinates of reality where and when something is could briefly become fluid. A ship or plane caught in such a storm might not simply vanish. It could slip, it might be displaced a few miles, or it might be thrown decades into the past or future. exiting the distortion only to find itself in an unrecognizable sea. This would explain the utter lack of wreckage in many cases. The vessel is not at the bottom of the ocean. It is untethered from its original moment entirely. These ideas find eerie echoes in the oldest stories. Myths from around the world speak of fairy realms, spirit worlds, and lost islands that appear only once every 100 years. These are not just fantasies, they could be cultural memories of encounters with these natural irregularities. A sailor returns to port claiming he was gone for a single day, only to find that a century has passed. His story becomes a legend, a warning about cursed waters where time itself unravels. The Philadelphia experiment, whether fact or folklore, acts as a crucial modern linchpin. It takes the ancient notion of a sacred, dangerous energy and dresses it in the language of 20th century science, giving a speculative shape to the triangle's deepest mystery. It suggests that the disappearances are not endings but transitions, and that the ocean's greatest secret might not be a what but a when. Time vortexes and naval experiments push the mind to its limits, but the search for proof always returns to the ocean floor. In the late 1990s, a Canadian exploration company was conducting a routine sonar survey off the western tip of Cuba. Their equipment pinged the deep, and the returning image made them stop cold. Lying under 2,200 feet of water on a desolate plain were a series of massive geometric structures. The most stunning appeared to be a perfect, smooth-sided pyramid, larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. The sonar maps showed not just one, but a potential complex of buildings with clear right angles and symmetrical layouts spanning several square miles. The team called it a possible sunken city. Then, in 2012, explorers using side-scan sonar in the central Bahamas, near the island of Andros, found another colossal anomaly. This one was a towering, steep-sided structure rising from the abyssal plain, its silhouette against the sonar screen unmistakably pyramidal. These were not vague shapes. The images presented crisp, sharp edges and flat planes that stood in stark contrast to the organic, rounded forms of natural geology. The immediate question, of course, was, what are we really looking at? The scientific community was deeply skeptical. Geologists proposed these could be rare but entirely natural formations. One leading theory points to a process called stepped carbonate platform formation. Over millions of years, layers of limestone can deposit and erode in cycles, creating dramatic terraced cliffs that, from a certain angle with low-resolution sonar, might mimic a pyramid silhouette. Others suggested they could be the remnants of a gigantic, submerged sand dune system from an ancient Ice Age coastline, now cemented into rock. The key argument from skeptics is one of scale and environment. Building at a depth of over 2,000 feet would require technology to withstand pressures that would crush modern submarines, in an era when, according to mainstream history, humans were barely mastering agriculture. If these are ruins, they are not just old, they are impossibly ancient, from a time when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower, placing their construction in a pre-flood world we can scarcely imagine. This is the heart of the debate. If even one of these sonar anomalies proves to be artificial, it forces a historical earthquake. It means a sophisticated society, capable of monumental architecture and deep water engineering, thrived in the Americas thousands of years before the Egyptians laid their first stone. This civilization would have existed precisely where the legends have always pointed, in the middle of the Atlantic, and its catastrophic sinking would have literally created the geographical and perhaps the energetic conditions of the Bermuda Triangle. The structures would be the physical foundation stones of Atlantis, not a metaphor but a drowned metropolis. Proponents argue that the precise geometry is the clue that nature cannot replicate so perfectly. They point to the apparent roadways and circular formations nearby, suggesting urban planning. The search continues, hindered by the immense cost and difficulty of mounting a deep-sea archaeological expedition to 2,000 feet. A definitive answer requires physical samples, close-up video, and the touch of a robotic hand on those smooth, enigmatic walls. Until then, these sonar ghosts remain the most tantalizing pieces of evidence in the entire puzzle. They are the modern, technological echo of an ancient fear, a digital age confirmation that something profoundly strange and possibly man-made does lie in the triangle's silent, sunken heart. Those sonar ghosts in the deep Atlantic have a dedicated group of hunters, and their quest is fueled by one man's sleeping visions, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, known as the ARE, was founded to preserve and investigate the work of Edgar Cayce. With its headquarters in Virginia Beach, it is far more than a historical society. It is the organizational heart of the modern search for Atlantis, treating Cayce's psychic readings not as metaphor but as a literal treasure map. For decades, their researchers and funded explorers have turned their attention to the shallow banks and blue holes of the Bahamas, convinced that the final fragments of the lost continent lie there waiting. This is where ancient explanation collides with modern technology, a spiritual hunch tested by side-scan sonar and robotic submersibles. The ARE supports expeditions that methodically grid the seafloor, listening for the ping of something that should not be there. They employ archaeological divers who brave the labyrinthine underwater cave systems, believing these flooded caverns might have been used or even built by the Atlanteans as shelters or sacred sites. Their work is a fascinating blend of faith and science, a deliberate mission to prove that our oldest stories are physical truths buried under sand and time. Among their most talked about discoveries are collections of unusual stones pulled from the Bahamian seabed. Dubbed by some as the Atlantis stones, these objects are not grand pillars. They are often smaller, handheld stones that exhibit peculiar characteristics. Some appear oddly symmetrical, like discs or triangles with edges that seem worked. Others are composed of materials like a type of marble or granite that geologists say are not native to the Bahamas, suggesting they were brought there. The most compelling to believers are stones that bear what look like tool marks, straight grooves or drilled holes that mimic the techniques of ancient stonemasonry. To a trained archaeologist, these are often dismissed as naturally formed beach rock or the result of centuries of tidal erosion and coral growth. Nature, after all, is a master sculptor of suggestive shapes. But for the ARE researchers, the context is everything. Finding a cluster of such stones in a location Cayce described far from any known ancient trade routes is seen as potential evidence of a human presence where mainstream history says there was none. The credibility of these finds is, unsurprisingly, a dividing line. Mainstream archaeology requires a chain of evidence, a clear stratigraphic context, and peer-reviewed analysis before accepting an artifact as proof of a civilization. A stone pulled from a shifting sand bed by a diver without the precise archaeological documentation of a dig site is inherently difficult to verify. It could be a ballast stone from a much later shipwreck or a natural formation that simply looks artificial. The ARE acknowledges this skepticism and has increasingly sought to professionalize its approach, partnering with geologists and using more rigorous documentation. Yet the driving force remains the prophetic narrative. This is the unique power of the ancient explanation. It does not just inspire a hobby, it fuels a decades-long, well-funded search with a specific goal. The belief in Atlantis as described by Cayce provides a framework that turns random anomalies into meaningful clues. A strange sonar return is not just a geological curiosity, it is a possible temple platform. An oddly shaped stone is not just a curiosity, it is a fragment of a firestone generator. This framework is both its greatest strength and its most significant vulnerability. It can lead to groundbreaking discovery if the bias is correct, but it can also see patterns where only nature exists, ultimately the work of the ARE demonstrates a profound human truth. We are not satisfied with the ocean as an empty grave. We need it to be a library. The ancient stories, whether from Plato or a psychic, give us a catalog number, a hope that we can pull a book from the shelves and finally read the lost chapter of our own history. Their ongoing search, with all its controversy, proves that the deepest mystery of the Bermuda Triangle may not be what it takes, but what it promises us we might find. The search for a lost city beneath the waves leads our story to a continent away and to a sky filled with ancient machines. Long before the Wright brothers, the great epics of India speak of a technology that seems to leap from the pages of science fiction. These are the Vimanas, the legendary flying chariots of gods and heroes described in texts like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. They are not drawn by mythical beasts but are detailed as complex vehicles. Some accounts describe them as multi-level structures with portholes and domes, powered by what is translated as mercury vortex engines, capable of astonishing speed, hovering silently, and even rendering themselves invisible. The descriptions are so mechanically precise that they have fueled centuries of speculation. Could these be poetic metaphors, or are they fragmented records of a real, advanced aeronautical science from a forgotten age? If we entertain the latter, even for a moment, a startling connection to the Bermuda Triangle emerges. Imagine a civilization that mastered flight millennia ago, a culture with vessels that navigated not just continents but perhaps the globe. If their technology was based on principles of electromagnetic propulsion or gravitational manipulation, as some interpretations of the Mercury engine suggest, then the need for specific bases or energy sources becomes logical. The theorized planetary energy grid, with its vile vortices, presents a compelling possibility. These nodes of anomalous Earth energy would be the perfect places to establish fueling stations or navigation beacons for such advanced craft. The Bermuda Triangle, a known hotspot of magnetic and gravitational irregularity, would be a prime candidate for a major Vimana port or hub. Now consider a catastrophe. Whether through war, societal collapse, or a natural disaster like the one that may have sunk Atlantis, this advanced civilization falls. Their sky cities and aerial fleets are lost to time, their bases abandoned or destroyed. But what if something remained? The theory suggests that deep beneath the silt of the Sargasso Sea, or buried under the limestone of the Bahamian platform, lies the wreckage of a Vimana base, or perhaps even a crashed mothership of colossal scale. Its power source, whether a mercury vortex system or something even more exotic, might not be entirely inert. Damaged and unstable, it could periodically activate, sending out pulses of the same kind of energy it once used for flight and stealth. To a modern ship or plane, this would be a nightmare. A sudden surge of electromagnetic force from below would explain compass failures and instrument blackouts. A gravitational distortion field could cause a plane to drop from the sky as if the lift vanished, or make a ship feel suddenly heavier, dragging it under in seconds. The reported invisibility of Vimanas offers another chilling parallel. If a residual cloaking field from such technology flickered on, it could theoretically bend light or radar around an area, making a vessel vanish from sight and screen in an instant. This idea weaves a global tapestry of myth. It connects the dragon palaces of Japan's Devil's Sea to the sunken temples of Atlantis, and now to the sky chariots of ancient India. It proposes that our oldest stories of gods in flying machines are not mere fantasies, but cultural memories of a shared technological past. The Bermuda Triangle, in this view, becomes a cosmic junkyard, a place where the forgotten machinery of a prior age occasionally stirs from its long slumber, its dying systems reaching up to snatch the vehicles of what it might see as a primitive new world. It is a reminder that the ancient sky and the ancient sea might hold the very same secret. Ancient stories of sky chariots and sunken cities speak to a deep human need for explanation, but the sky and sea above the triangle have their own brutal, natural vocabulary. Among the most terrifying possibilities is a storm of such magnitude it defies modern experience, a hypercane. Picture not just a hurricane, but a superstorm hundreds of miles wide, with winds exceeding 500 miles per hour, fueled not by normal sea warmth, but by the intense heat of an oceanic thermal vent or a massive methane hydrate eruption. During warmer climatic periods in Earth's deep past, such as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum around 56 million years ago, the oceans were significantly hotter. In these ancient, simmering seas, the conditions could have been perfect for hypercanes to form. A single one of these monsters would not just sink ships, it would vaporize them, scouring the ocean surface clean and churning the waters to unimaginable depths. For any ancient civilization living along the coasts of the Atlantic, witnessing the aftermath or even the distant approach of such an event would be an epoch-defining catastrophe. The sky would turn black for days, the sea would rise in mountains of water, and the sound would be like the world ending. How would a Stone Age or Bronze Age culture process that? They would not have the science of meteorology. They would see only the rage of a god, the breath of a dragon, or the opening of a portal to the underworld. The very geography could be reshaped, coastlines erased, islands submerged. This provides a compelling, natural origin for the great flood myths found in countless cultures, from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical story of Noah. A hypercane striking the Atlantic basin could easily be remembered as a divine punishment that drowned the world, with the most violently affected area. Perhaps our triangle becoming forever marked as a place of primordial divine anger. But the ocean's fury is not always so vast. Sometimes it strikes with the precision of a sniper. This is the microburst, a sudden, intense downdraft of wind that hits the surface and explodes outward. Over open water, a microburst is invisible and deadly. One moment the sea is calm. The next, a localized blast of wind slams down with the force of a bomb, creating a massive, sudden impact crater in the water and generating waves that radiate out in chaotic, crossing patterns. For a wooden sailing ship, even a large one, the effect would be catastrophic. The vessel could be capsized instantly or smashed apart by the conflicting waves, sinking in minutes. There would be no storm clouds to see coming, no gradual build-up of wind. It would be a literal bolt from the blue. Ancient sailors surviving such an event, perhaps watching a sister ship simply disintegrate beside them on a clear day, could only rationalize it as an attack from below. A sea monster like the Leviathan or the Kraken, rising from the depths to strike the hull with an invisible fist. The legend writes itself. These extreme weather phenomena, both the colossal and the pinpoint, offer a powerful bridge back to the ancient fear. They are not persistent technological anomalies or alien portals. They are rare but entirely natural atmospheric events that have occurred for millions of years. Their sporadic, violent nature explains why the triangle might be safe for centuries, then suddenly claim multiple victims in a short period. They embed a legitimate, experiential danger into the cultural memory of any people who live near or sail through these waters. The stories of angry Poseidon or the great serpent Jörmungandr churning the sea are not mere fantasy. They are the ancient world's best attempt to explain a hypercane. The tales of giant tentacles pulling ships down on a sunny day are a primal understanding of a microburst. The fear is real because the danger was and is real. It was written into human myth by the sheer, awesome power of a chaotic climate long before the first compass ever spun. The sky can fall without a single cloud in sight. When author Vincent Gaddis first drew those three famous lines on a map in 1964, he gave the world more than just a name. He proposed a specific, chilling mechanism for the vanishings, something he called an electronic fog. Gaddis envisioned this not as a normal mist of water droplets, but as a thick, swirling haze of charged particles, an electromagnetic smog that could roll silently across a calm sea or descend from a clear sky. Within this fog, he theorized, the normal rules of physics began to break down. Compasses would spin uselessly, radios would crackle into static, and every electrical system on a ship or plane would short out and die. But the most haunting part of his idea was the psychological effect. Pilots and sailors caught inside this electronic murk reported losing all sense of time and direction. Minutes could feel like hours, the horizon would vanish, and a profound, paralyzing disorientation would set in. They were not just lost, they were untethered from reality itself, adrift in a silent, glowing void where navigation by instinct or instrument became impossible. This 20th century theory finds a deep and unsettling echo in the oldest sailors' warnings. Maritime folklore from around the world is filled with tales of strange, luminous fogs that lead ships to their doom. Celtic myths speak of the Cailleach, a supernatural haze that would cloak the sea, causing vessels to sail in circles until they perished. Scandinavian legends describe the Myling lights, the wisps over water that lured the unwary onto rocks. In the Caribbean, stories passed down for generations tell of sudden, silent banks of fog that appear on still days, fog that seems to glow with a faint internal light, and from which ships never re-emerge. For centuries, these stories were dismissed as superstitious fantasy, the product of frightened minds on a vast and empty ocean. But what if those ancient witnesses were describing the very same phenomenon Geologists would later name? What they called a spirit mist or a dragon's breath could have been a natural plasma event. Plasma is often called the fourth state of matter, a superheated cloud of charged ions and electrons, and it is far more common than we think. We see it in lightning, in the aurora borealis, and in the gentle glow of a neon sign. The unique geophysical soup of the Bermuda Triangle could be a perfect recipe for creating plasma at sea level. Intense methane gas eruptions from the seabed surging through salt water could ionize the air above. The region's well-documented magnetic anomalies could further shape and contain these charged clouds. The result would be a rolling, glowing fog of natural plasma, a literal electronic fog that would play havoc with any metal object or electrical circuit within it. A wooden sailing ship from the age of exploration with its iron nails and fittings would become a perfect target. Its compass would swing wildly, its crew would see an eerie luminescence in the air around them, and they would be utterly helpless, their technology rendered primitive and useless. In that moment of silent, glowing confusion, a simple wrong turn or a sudden squall could be the end. Geologists' electronic fog theory does something remarkable. It takes an ancient supernatural fear and reclothes it in the language of modern geophysics. It suggests that the oldest stories were not wrong, they were simply using the only vocabulary they had. The ghosts in the mist were never spirits, they were ions, and the Bermuda Triangle's most enduring mystery may be that sometimes the air itself can turn against you. The electronic fog offers a scientific ghost story, but it is the silence that truly haunts the record books. When we step back from the legends and look at the cold numbers, a curious pattern emerges. Statistically, the Bermuda Triangle is not the black hole of the Atlantic that popular culture often paints. It is one of the world's busiest shipping lanes and flight corridors, a superhighway of modern travel. With that volume of traffic, some accidents and disappearances are tragically expected. The rate of loss, when calculated by square mile or by number of transits, is not significantly higher than in other heavily trafficked and storm-prone areas like the North Sea or the waters off Japan. Insurance companies do not charge higher premiums for voyages through the Triangle, a telling fact from an industry built on assessing risk. So, on paper, the mystery seems to dissolve. The Triangle is simply a place where the laws of probability play out on a vast blue stage. Yet, the statistician's ledger tells only half the story. It is not the quantity of losses that chills the spine, but their quality. The pattern is not one of common maritime disaster with mayday calls, search grids, and floating wreckage. The signature of the Triangle is the clean, silent vanish. Time and again, the record shows vessels and aircraft that were there one moment and utterly gone the next, often in fair weather, with no distress signal ever sent. A ship like the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a massive 500-foot tanker, vanished with 39 souls in February 1963. No wreckage was found. No radio call was made. It simply ceased to exist between one position report and the next. This peculiar signature, the absence of a cry for help, the lack of even a life jacket or an oil slick, is what separates these events from ordinary tragedy. It is as if the victims were not caught in a storm or a collision, but were quietly and completely erased from our world. This eerie pattern finds a perfect mirror in the oldest stories humanity tells. Across cultures, our myths are filled with tales of people and objects being taken, not destroyed. Celtic folklore speaks of the land of Tyr na and Og, a fairy realm where time flows differently, and mortals who enter often cannot return. Norse legends tell of ships lured into the mist by the radiant glow of Alfheim, the elf world, never to be seen again. In Japanese lore, the Dragon's Triangle was said to be a gateway to Ryugu-jo, the undersea palace where visitors might spend what feels like a single day, only to emerge a century later. These are not stories of violent death. They are stories of transition, of beings whisked away to a limbo just beyond the veil of the everyday world. The consistency of this theme is startling. From the Mediterranean to the Pacific, ancient cultures living near volatile seas developed the same core narrative. Something in that geography, they insisted, could take you, not kill you, but remove you. Your ship would not be wrecked, it would be translated. When a modern pilot radios that the ocean looks wrong and his compasses are spinning before static swallows his voice, he is experiencing the technological echo of that ancient fear. He is not reporting a fire or a hull breach. He is describing a fundamental unraveling of his reality, a feeling of being untethered that precedes the silence. This persistent cross-cultural story of a limbo for the lost is perhaps the most compelling evidence that the Triangle's mystery is not a modern invention. It is a deep, geological whisper that human beings have been hearing for thousands of years. The names and technologies change, but the experience, the sudden, silent transition into the unknown, remains hauntingly the same. So we are left with a paradox. The statistics say there is no monster here, but the stories, both ancient and modern, insist that something stranger than a monster is at work. That ancient fear of being taken, not killed, finds a modern face in the night sky. If our oldest myths describe visitors from other realms with impossible technology, what happens when we apply a 20th century lens to that idea? The theory of ancient astronauts proposes exactly that, popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken. It suggests that the gods and mythical beings described in our oldest texts were not deities but extraterrestrial explorers. Their advanced ships became chariots of fire, their powerful tools became magic wands, and their visits became the foundation of religion. This idea, controversial and thrilling, lands directly in the middle of our mystery. If such beings visited Earth in the distant past, they would need bases, especially if their interest was long-term observation. Proponents of this angle point to the Bermuda Triangle as a prime candidate for a submerged extraterrestrial installation. Think about the requirements. A base would need to be remote, difficult for primitive humans to access, and likely hidden. An underwater facility in the deep Atlantic, perhaps built into the side of a seamount or camouflaged on the abyssal plain, would be perfect. The Triangle's persistent electromagnetic anomalies could even be a side effect of their technology, a kind of energy signature or containment field that has been leaking for millennia. In this scenario, the ancient Atlanteans themselves might not have been a native human civilization, but an alien colony or a human society uplifted by extraterrestrial knowledge. Their great crystals and firestones were not mystical, but technological power sources, communication devices, or propulsion units for their craft. The cataclysm that sank their city could have been an accident, a war, or the deliberate scuttling of a base that was no longer needed. But what if it was never fully deactivated? The theory suggests that the alien machinery, damaged and abandoned, continues to operate on automatic, cycling through dormant and active states. When it powers up, it creates the very conditions that define the triangle's danger. The electronic fog is a malfunctioning cloaking field. The compass deviations are from powerful subspace communications or scanning beams. A ship or plane that vanishes without a trace might not have been destroyed, but accidentally intercepted, transported, studied, or simply removed as an intruder in a secured zone. This idea is fueled by a persistent correlation between the Bermuda Triangle and UFO reports. Pilots and ship captains have long described strange, fast-moving lights in the region, objects that dart below the horizon or plunge into the sea. In 1978, a Japanese freighter radioed about a series of luminous objects circling the ship before ascending vertically at incredible speed. In more recent decades, declassified military reports note numerous encounters by Navy pilots off the southeastern coast of the United States, with objects exhibiting physics-defying maneuvers. These are not the vague glows of methane plasma, but structured craft under intelligent control, often seen in the same geographic pocket as the disappearances. The ancient astronaut theory weaves these threads into a single, startling tapestry. The dragon palaces of the Pacific and the sunken temples of the Atlantic are not separate myths, but different cultural interpretations of the same reality: alien underwater bases. The Vimanas of India were not poetic imagination, but accurate descriptions of scout craft. The gods who demanded worship were simply explorers establishing control, their technology so advanced it seemed like divine power to Bronze Age humans. And the Bermuda Triangle, it is not a graveyard. It is an active, albeit malfunctioning, security perimeter. The vanishings are not accidents of nature, but the occasional, tragic result when human technology blunders into an alien one that is millions of years more advanced and still running on automatic. This perspective answers the haunting question of why there is often no debris. A craft that can manipulate gravity or transition between dimensions would not leave a splintered hull or a floating seat cushion. It would simply be gone, pulled into a hangar bay or a different plane of existence entirely. The silence of the Mayday call makes terrible sense if the vessel was taken faster than a human hand could reach for the radio. While mainstream science dismisses this as speculation without physical proof, the theory's power lies in its narrative completeness. It explains the ancient myths, the modern sightings, and the bizarre physical phenomena all at once. It turns the triangle from a passive hazard into an active site, a place where humanity's past and a cosmic present uncomfortably intersect. The ocean's greatest secret, then, might not be a sunken city of human origin, but a starport sleeping in the dark, waiting for its builders to return. But beneath the alien base and above the ancient wreck, a river flows through the sea. It is the Gulf Stream, a vast, warm, and relentless ocean current that forms the western boundary of the Bermuda Triangle. This is no gentle drift. It is a liquid highway up to 50 miles wide, moving with the power of thousands of nuclear reactors, carrying more water than all the world's rivers combined. Its surface currents can race at over 5.5 miles per hour, a speed that would challenge an Olympic swimmer and effortlessly sweep away any floating object. This single, natural force provides one of the most pragmatic answers to the triangle's central puzzle: the clean vanish. Imagine a ship suffering a catastrophic failure, perhaps from a sudden storm or an internal explosion. It sinks, the wreckage settles on the bottom, but lighter debris, life jackets, wooden planks, luggage floats to the surface. In most oceans, that debris would linger, forming a grim marker for search parties. In the Gulf Stream, it is immediately caught in a powerful, eastward-flowing river within the sea. Within hours, that debris field can be scattered across dozens of square miles. Within a day, it is carried far beyond any reasonable search area, dispersed into the immense emptiness of the Atlantic. A plane that crashes into these waters meets the same fate. What searchers expect to find a concentrated slick of oil, a cluster of seeds, is instead instantly unraveled and carried away by this immense natural conveyor belt. The absence of physical evidence, which fuels so much speculation about otherworldly forces, is often just the Gulf Stream doing exactly what it has always done, moving. For the ancient world, this current was a force of pure mythic terror. Picture a Phoenician trading vessel or a Spanish caravel, its captain navigating by the stars and the feel of the wind. If a storm or navigational error pushed them into the grip of the Gulf Stream, their fate was sealed. Their sailing technology, designed for coastal waters or predictable trade winds, was no match for this aquatic juggernaut. They would be swept northward at a speed they could not fight, their sails useless against the current. The familiar coastline would recede, and they would be carried into the cold, foggy vastness of the North Atlantic, a place far from their known world. Their supplies would run out, their crew would succumb to exposure and despair. Their ship, a ghost vessel, would eventually succumb to the waves. From the perspective of their home port, they did not sink in a battle with a storm. They were simply taken. They sailed into a stretch of water and were never seen again, consumed by a sea that seemed to actively pull the unlucky into oblivion. The Gulf Stream, therefore, is not just a geographical feature. It is the engine of a very real, very ancient mystery. It physically erases the evidence of disaster, creating the perfect conditions for a legend of a clean, silent graveyard. And it provided our ancestors with a visceral, experiential truth. Some currents in this world do not let go. That river in the sea shows us a power indifferent to our stories. It simply is, and it acts according to its own immense laws. This brings us to the most critical and perhaps most humbling perspective of all. The ultimate ancient explanation for the Bermuda Triangle may not be crystals, vortexes, or alien bases. It is the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of the ocean itself and the profound fallibility of the humans who dare to cross it. We have spent centuries personifying the sea, giving it gods and monsters and curses, because the alternative is almost more terrifying. The truth is that the sea is not malicious. It is simply vast, powerful, and utterly indifferent. For an ancient sailor in a wooden ship, or even a modern pilot in a metal aircraft, the scale is almost incomprehensible. The triangle covers roughly 500,000 square miles of open ocean. Within that blue expanse, a ship is a speck. A plane is a fleeting shadow. The forces at play, waves that can reach the height of a 10-story building, winds that can shred steel, currents that can erase all evidence in hours, operate on a scale that dwarfs human endeavor. In such an environment, the margin for error is razor thin, and the consequences of a single mistake are absolute and final. Navigational error is a timeless culprit. Before satellite guidance, navigation was an art of estimation using stars, compasses, and dead reckoning. A simple miscalculation of your position, an error compounded over days at sea, could put you dozens of miles off course. You might sail directly into the path of a hurricane you thought was far away, or onto a treacherous reef that should not have been there. The legendary Spanish treasure fleets laden with gold were particularly vulnerable. A heavy storm could scatter the ships, and a captain relying on a faulty chart or a fog-obscured landmark could easily lead his entire crew to a watery grave. Their disappearance from the perspective of Spain would be sudden, complete, and utterly mysterious. We see this pattern repeat into the modern era. Take the case of the Star Tiger, a British airliner that vanished in January 1948 on a flight from the Azores to Bermuda. The official investigation concluded that the most likely cause was a combination of navigational uncertainty due to strong headwinds and the failure of a critical radio direction finding system. Essentially, they got lost, their fuel ran out, and they went down in a cold, empty sea. the lack of a distress call was attributed to radio failure. There was no supernatural event required, only a chain of technical and human failures against a backdrop of immense, pitiless ocean. Then there is the simple, brutal reality of mechanical failure. A ship is a complex machine under constant assault by saltwater and stress. A single weld can fail, a boiler can explode. A plane, for all its sophistication, is a collection of parts, each with a potential point of failure. In the 1940s and 50s, the aircraft commonly flying these routes were less reliable than today's jets. An engine fire, structural fatigue, or sudden decompression could doom a flight in minutes, leaving no time for a mayday. The ocean does not need ancient energy fields to claim these vessels. It only needs a weak spot, a moment of vulnerability, and its natural forces will do the rest. This rational view does not dismiss the mystery, it reframes it. It asks us to consider the psychology of the legend. When faced with the utter, silent vanishing of a ship like the Marine Sulphur Queen, our minds rebel against the idea of a random bolt shearing or a hatch bursting open. Such explanations feel inadequate for the scale of the loss. We crave a cause that matches the effect, a grand, dramatic, hidden truth. The ancient stories of sea monsters and sunken cities, and the modern ones of electronic fog and time warps, are attempts to give the immense, impersonal power of the ocean a face and a reason. They are a way for us to process the terrifying notion that sometimes in that vast blue wilderness, things just go wrong, and the sea swallows the evidence without a trace. It is a reminder that the greatest mystery of the Bermuda Triangle may not be something hidden beneath the waves, but something within us, our need to find meaning in the random chaos of nature, and our enduring awe of a frontier that remains in its heart profoundly unknown. That rational view of the ocean's indifference, however, cannot erase the power of a story once it has taken hold, and few stories have proven more durable than the legend of the Sargasso Sea. What began as a genuine geographical hazard for ancient mariners did not fade with the age of sail. Instead, it was reborn, transformed by the imagination of writers into a cornerstone of modern mystery. The transition from sailor's warning to pop culture icon began in earnest with one of the greatest storytellers of the 19th century, Jules Verne. In his epic novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, published in 1870, Verne sends Captain Nemo's Nautilus on a deliberate voyage into the heart of the Sargasso. He describes it not just as a place of calm, but as a vast floating cemetery. Verne writes of a tangled graveyard of ships from every era, their hulls locked in a perpetual embrace by the thick golden weed, their crews long since vanished. This was not a casual setting. Verne was weaving together the very real dread of the doldrums with the growing Victorian fascination with the unknown. He gave the ancient fear a vivid, theatrical stage, a silent, sun-bleached junkyard of history where the past was physically preserved and doomed. This image, crafted by a master of scientific romance, electrified the public. It cemented the Sargasso in the popular mind not as a navigational inconvenience, but as a supernatural trap, a place where the sea itself held onto its victims and refused to let go. Verne's vision was a catalyst. It opened a floodgate for a new genre of pulp adventure stories in the early 20th century. Cheap magazines and serialized novels, hungry for sensational tales, seized upon the Sargasso Sea as a ready-made setting for horror and wonder. Writers spun yarns of modern vessels stumbling into this forgotten zone, only to find it populated by the ghost ships of pirates, Spanish galleons, and even Viking longships, all eerily preserved. These stories often featured desperate survivors living on the rotting hulks, or strange civilizations that had evolved in the floating jungle. The Sargasso was no longer just a trap, it was a lost world, a hidden dimension within the Atlantic where time stood still and the normal rules did not apply. This literary evolution is the crucial, hidden link between ancient lore and the 20th century myth. The pulp stories took the kernel of truth, the terrifying calm and the historical losses, and amplified it into a consistent, dramatic narrative. They created a template for disappearance that was clean, eerie, and total. A ship didn't just sink in a storm, it was captured by the sea, pulled into a silent, green labyrinth from which there was no return. By the time Vincent Gaddis sat down to draw his famous lines on the map in the 1960s, the cultural groundwork was already complete. The public consciousness was primed by decades of fiction to accept the idea of a specific zone of oceanic mystery. The Bermuda Triangle did not emerge from a statistical vacuum. It was, in many ways, the modern, branded successor to the Sargasso Sea legends. Gaddis simply shifted the focus slightly west, updated the victims from sailing ships to airplanes and steamers, and provided a new, scientific-sounding name for an old, romantic fear. The electronic fog and magnetic vortices were the new technological explanations for the same eternal silence that Verne and the pulp writers had described. So when we dissect the modern legend of the Triangle, we are not just looking at ship logs and weather reports. We are reading the latest chapter in a story that began with Phoenician whispers, was illustrated by Jules Verne's nightmare, and was sensationalized by the pulps. The ancient fear of a sea that traps was patiently waiting for centuries for the right moment to be rediscovered and renamed. It proves that a place becomes legendary not merely by what happens there, but by the stories we are already prepared to believe. Our need to find grand meaning in the ocean's silence has always been challenged by the steady march of technology. For every ancient myth of a dragon's breath, we now have a satellite image. For every tale of a compass spinning wildly, we have a forensic model of a magnetic storm. The modern era has brought with it tools that can peer into the past with astonishing clarity, and in doing so, it has demystified many of the Triangle's most famous ghosts. Take the case that once seemed utterly inexplicable, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen. This massive tanker vanished in February 1963 with 39 souls, leaving no distress call and no trace. For decades, it was a cornerstone of the supernatural argument, a modern ship erased by the ancient curse. But later investigations, armed with better oceanographic data and engineering analysis, revealed a far more tragic and ordinary story. The Marine Sulphur Queen had been converted from a wartime tanker to carry molten sulfur, a cargo that required its tanks to be heated to over 250 degrees Fahrenheit. This retrofit created severe structural weaknesses, combined with evidence of a powerful storm in the area at the time of its disappearance. The most likely scenario became heartbreakingly clear. The ship likely suffered a catastrophic hull fracture, breaking in two and sinking so quickly that no one could reach the radio. The volatile sulfur would have exploded on contact with seawater, vaporizing much of the wreckage and leaving little to float. The Gulf Stream then did what it always does, scattering the scant remains across 1,000 miles of ocean. The mystery was not one of otherworldly forces, but of metal fatigue, extreme chemistry, and bad weather. This pattern of technological clarification repeats across the ledger. The 5 Avenger bombers of Flight 19, the case that ignited the modern legend, are now widely understood by aviation experts as a tragic cascade of human error and failing equipment. The flight leader was likely disoriented, his compass malfunctioning, and he mistakenly believed he was over the Florida Keys when he was actually far out in the Atlantic. In a desperate attempt to find land, he led his squadron east until they ran out of fuel. The Martin Mariner flying boat sent to rescue them did not vanish into a portal. It almost certainly exploded in mid-air, a known hazard for that aircraft type due to fuel vapor leaks. Even Christopher Columbus's strange lights and compass deviations have plausible modern explanations. The lights were likely bioluminescence from disturbed plankton or the glow of distant meteors. The compass variation was simply the result of crossing the agonic line, where magnetic north and true north align, a phenomenon he could not have understood. Each of these solutions strips away a layer of the supernatural, replacing myth with mechanics and curse with circumstance. We now live in an age of constant surveillance. Every commercial ship larger than a certain size is required to carry an automated identification system, broadcasting its identity, position, and course to satellites and other vessels in real time. Aircraft are tracked by secondary radar and satellite networks like EDSB, creating a digital fingerprint that is nearly impossible to lose. Search and rescue operations are coordinated with satellite imagery that can spot a life raft in open water. The ocean has not become less dangerous, but our ability to see and understand its dangers has grown exponentially. A ship in distress today is not simply swallowed by silence, it leaves a digital trail. This pervasive tracking has, in a very real sense, shrunk the Bermuda Triangle. The vast blank spaces on the map where imagination could run wild are now filled with data points, weather models, and known shipping lanes. The zone of the unknown has been pushed back, confined to the gaps between sensor pings and the rare, perfect storm of simultaneous system failures, and yet the legend endures. It persists because a handful of cases, even in this modern age, resist a tidy solution. These are the disappearances where the technology was present, the weather was calm, and the vessel still vanished without sending a signal. They are the outliers, the statistical anomalies that no amount of data can yet fully explain. It is these stubborn, enigmatic cases that act as anchors for the ancient theories. When all the rational explanations have been applied and a mystery remains, the human mind instinctively reaches for the older, deeper stories. The crystal reactors of Atlantis, the malfunctioning alien base, the time vortex. These are not explanations for the 99% of solved cases. They are the refuge for the puzzling 1%, the stories we tell when the data runs out. The Bermuda Triangle, therefore, has evolved. It is no longer a general zone of high risk but a specific symbol. It represents the shrinking, yet persistently real, frontier of the unknown in our hyper-connected world. It is the place where our brightest technology still meets a dark and ancient question, and sometimes, for reasons we cannot yet see, the question wins. We have sailed from Plato's philosophical Atlantis to the churning methane vents on the ocean floor, and from Edgar Case's sleeping prophecies to the cold statistics of the Gulf Stream. This journey reveals that the Bermuda Triangle's true power is not found in a single answer, but in its unique position as a crossroads. It is a place where the measurable, violent science of our planet, the gas eruptions, the magnetic fields, the sheer scale of the sea collide seamlessly with humanity's oldest and deepest need for story. We have a primal urge to explain the silence, to give a face to the vast indifference of nature. So we built legends. We populated the deep with crystal reactors and sunken starports, with dragon palaces and time vortices. These are not lies, they are translations. They are the language of awe, attempts to articulate a genuine, experienced mystery that predates compasses and flight. The triangle endures because it is both things at once, a navigational reality with demonstrable hazards, and a blank canvas upon which we project our wonder about the unknown. It is a dialogue between the hard facts of the deep blue and the soft light of human imagination. So now the question turns to you. After this voyage through ancient fears and modern data, which thread feels most true? Do you hear the echo of a geological hiccup in every disappearance, or does your mind wander to the possibility of a forgotten machine still humming beneath the silt? The ocean keeps its secrets, but the conversation is ours to continue. Share your theory in the comments below. Let's see what other explanations surface from the depths of this endless mystery.